Hi students, I can think of nothing better to finish out the semester with as consciousness, and this includes things like sleep and dreaming, psychoactive drugs, even hypnosis and biofeedback and meditation. First, we have to start with what is consciousness. So in this lesson, we'll define what consciousness is, and we'll distinguish between the different states of consciousness. Any conversation about consciousness, we must think about what it actually is. So consciousness as sensory awareness. Think of all the things that are happening within us in this moment, just simply being. We are aware of our surroundings through sensory awareness. You're aware of your environment. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Are there lights too dim? We are aware of what's going on inside of us, our thoughts and our feelings, and we are also aware of our sense of self and where we are in the world. So all these things make up the components of being conscious itself. But there's so many other things that are happening outside of our focus and awareness. Think back to our memory unit and cognition, that we only have like enough space in our brain to think of certain things at one time. And so there's a lot of things that we just don't plan for. Any conversation having to do with consciousness has to include Sigmund Freud and this iceberg. So there's different layers to our conscious awareness, and Sigmund Freud is one of our first ones in psychology to say it is the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. Now, unconscious for Sigmund Freud is not knocked out, have concussion. It is unconscious motives that are deep within our person that we just don't even know about. And so let me break this down. Remember the iceberg. An iceberg, you can only see what's on the surface, and there's so much more beneath the water that we're just unaware of. And so that's how Sigmund Freud describes consciousness. Okay, so consciousness defined for Sigmund Freud are our awareness of ourselves and one's environment. The preconscious is information that's not in the conscious or what you're thinking at that moment. So conscious is your short-term memory, your working memory, the things that are in your mind right now. It's the conscious moment. Preconscious are things that are memories, they're stored knowledge. They're things that we have to work a little bit harder to get to, like what did you do last night? What did you have for dinner last night? And then finally, your unconscious is the unacceptable thoughts, memories, wishes in which we are unaware. They are beneath the surface, but they still control our behavior. And so these things that we're not supposed to talk about, selfish needs, immoral urges, fears, violent motives, irrational wishes, shameful experiences, and unacceptable desires. For Sigmund Freud, largely about sexual motives and impulses, those are beneath the surface in our unconscious. So for Sigmund Freud, these layers of consciousness influence who we are and our personality. It is not just being conscious, there's also non-conscious processes that are going on without our conscious awareness, without us putting our energy towards things like breathing, heart rate. You don't have to walk into a room and think about your pupils dilating because of the lack of light. You don't have to think about your fingernails growing. These are things that your hair growing. You know, we wake up in the morning and we don't say to ourselves, gosh, I hope I get to breathe today. It just happens. These are non-conscious things that are happening beyond our awareness. Again, it's too much. We don't need to think about it, and so our bodies just move forward without us directing any attention to it. Now, we don't have any control over these functions, or do we? I'm going to show you with my next click a man who controls his heart rate by hooking himself up to a machine, and you'll listen for the beeps and the sound of him lowering his heart rate. It's pretty fascinating. So like I said, pretty impressive that he can just use his mind to lower his heart rate. Now this, I imagine, would take a lot of practice. Not only do we have these non-conscious states happening beyond our conscious awareness, we can also alter our state of consciousness either voluntarily or involuntarily. So one of the ways that we do it involuntarily is when we pass right out when we go to sleep. So sleeping and dreaming is a way to alter your state of consciousness. We can alter our state of consciousness by using psychoactive drugs. And by altered state of consciousness, I mean not one of those sensory awareness, conscious awareness, and awareness of my surroundings. So hypnosis is an altered state of consciousness, meditation, and biofeedback. Now, there are also other ways that we can alter our state of consciousness by going into like a sensory deprivation tank, by using hallucinations. If I stay up for 5 days in a row and no sleep, I'm going to start seeing little rabbits where they don't belong. These are ways that we do it, maybe involuntary, maybe voluntarily. So biologically, it can be altered state of consciousness can be induced. I've also asked you if you've ever been behind the wheel and been driving, and then all of a sudden you're in your driveway. This is an altered state of consciousness. We're not paying attention to what we're doing. It's not necessarily bad. It's just like daydreaming. Daydreaming is an altered state of consciousness, by the way. All right, guys, that's the conclusion of lesson 1.